Okay. For number 1, you need to translate the following expression. 6 less than 4 times a number squared. All of it's being squared. So that less than would make your 6 go in the back. 4 times whatever number you want, minus 6. And then all of that being squared. Questions on that one?
Wait, is that actually the final answer for 2?
Yes.
What? That is nothing to what I got.
That's okay.
Where'd you get 18 from?
I'll walk through it in a second. So for number 2, we needed to distribute. So 4 times 3 gives us 12. 4 times 2 gives us 8. Negative 2 times negative 5 gives us 10. Negative 2 times x gives us negative 2. And then combine your like terms. So here your like terms are 12x and negative 2x to get 10x. And 8 plus 10 will give you 18. Do you see where you went wrong? Other questions on 2? Number 3, you needed to evaluate. Put your x value of negative 3 in for all of your x's. And simplify. So if we put negative 3 in for all of our x's, this would become 9 minus 6 or negative 3. I'm sorry, 3. This is 3, not negative. So f of negative 3 equals 3 or f of x equals 3. Questions on that one? Number 4, we needed to find the slope between these 2 points. I know it's been a while since we did slope, but you're taking the y's and subtracting them, and then the x's and subtracting them. So 4 minus 4 would give us 0. 4 minus a negative 3 would give us 7, because you end up adding. But that doesn't matter because 0 divided by anything is 0. So our slope here is 0. Questions on number 4? Number 5, you have to graph the line whose slope is negative 2/3 and it goes through the point negative 2, 4. The easiest way to do this is to start at this point, negative 2, 4. And from that point, draw your slope. So go up 2 to the left 3, down 2 to the right 3, as many times as possible. This would not be an easy one to find your y-intercept. As you see, I did that, and you got a fraction. And then trying to graph that fraction would not be easy. Could be done, but not easy. Questions on that? So as I said at the end of last class, you were supposed to do those 6 problems in the graphing finding solutions notes. Take those out. We're going to go over those 6 problems. Starting with number 1. If your table or your graph is incorrect, you can go back and fix that later. Really, you should have these solutions, but it's written in a weird way, so I'm going to fix it. So you should have these 2 solutions, negative 5, 0, and 1, 0. Number 2, you should have just 1 solution, and that was at 1, 0. These points are also given to you in your table, so you can look for them there as well. But if you graphed it incorrectly, then you may be missing that. Number 3 did not cross your x-axis at all, so this had no solution. Do we have questions on any of those solutions before we continue?
Okay, so when you do a graph, so my graph isn't wrong, it's just yours is further back. So you have to have, you need it to go further back.
So for these, they had more points. So fill in the graph as much as possible. You really just need 5 points, your vertex in the middle, and then 2 others. But these just had more.
No,
Or is that not what you meant?
no, I just don't understand. Like, so I started at 0 in every single one.
So that shouldn't happen. You should be putting your vertex in the middle and going out from there. Because if you start at 0, you may or may not even have your graph on there. Number 4, your 2 solutions were at 2, 0 and 8, 0.
Thank you.
Five also had 2 solutions at -3, 0 and 3, 0. Your last problem, number 6, had 2 solutions at 0, 0 and 2, 0. So if you did not get those, you may have graphed your quadratic incorrectly, and you would need to go back and fix that so that you get the correct one. You can also double check it in your graph in Desmos, all of the above, to check those. Do we have any questions on finding the solution from a graph? There's one last thing that we need to talk about in these notes. Find this page. This will also help you with the confounding that are due this Friday. So just the 2 zeros of polynomials in a factored form and 0 product properties. But this is another way of looking at solutions. So for number 1, you may have to look at your paper because mine's kind of small. If I ask what are the solutions here, what would those be? Two, 0. And -4, 0. When we write this in factored form, we have to write this a little differently. So we're taking whatever the numbers are, and when we write them, we're going to change the sign. So instead of writing x minus 4, we're going to write x plus 4. Instead of writing x plus 2, we're going to write x minus 2. The reason we write them backwards like this is because when you get these factors. So like when we were factoring and we got factors at the end, the step that we didn't do, or the step we're not doing now, solving by factoring, is taking each of the factors, setting it equal to 0, and solving. So if I took both of these factors and I solved, for this one I would be subtracting, and I would get x equals -4, which is what we had on the graph. For this one I would be adding 2, and I would get 2, which is what we had on the graph. So in order to write this in factored form, we take the sign and we flip it, or do the opposite. So that's one part of this, taking whatever your zeros or solutions are and writing the opposite sign. The second part is writing the equation of this line. So to do that, we're going to multiply this back out. So we did this when we were factoring to see if it worked. Now we're going to do this to figure out what our actual equation is. So we're going to take that first number and multiply it to these two. Or that first term, I should say, because it wasn't really a number. X times x, you're adding the exponents, so this would be x squared. X times -2 would give us -2x. Then you're going to do the same thing to the last two. Take 4, multiply it to x and -2. Four times x would give us positive 4x. 4 times -2 would give us -8. Then we could combine like terms. So y equals x squared plus 2x minus 8. This would be our original equation. If we wanted to check this, we could graph this in our calculator, and it would match this. We could also put this in our calculator and this at the same time. They would overlap, and it would match this. Before we do another example, what questions do we have on this one? We're distributing, but twice. So x times everything in the second, and 4 times everything in the second. Let's do this one more. And number 2. What are your two solutions? Eight zero. I know it's kind of hard to see, but that is 8-0. And 7-0. So if I'm putting these in as factored form, how would we write that? Take these, do the opposite, x minus 7, x minus 8. Now we can distribute so that we can get our final answer. So x times these two, y equals x times x is x squared. X times -8 is -8x. And then do the same thing to the others. -7 times these two. -7 times x is -7x. Negative 7 times negative 8 is positive 56. Combine like terms. Y equals x squared minus 15x plus 56. Do we have any questions on how we did that? I want you to take the next 5 minutes and do numbers 3 and 4, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about them. And then switch gears. Yeah, hold on 1 second.
I don't know.
Check your answers with mine. So you should have x plus 8, x plus 3, and then y equals x squared plus 11x plus 24. Questions on that one?
Does it matter the order you put it in?
You mean originally?
Yeah, no, it does not.
If you switch them, you'll still get the same answer when you multiply. Number 4, x plus 1, x minus 5, and then your equation y equals x squared minus 4x minus 5. Questions on that? Yes. Great. Take out the notes in front of you that say quadratic formula. Here's something new, so I need everyone's attention. No more talking. This is the last thing that we need to learn about quadratics, which means the end of this unit is coming up soon.
It's near.
It is near.
The end is not.
Very. Your quiz and test are next week. The quarter ends in 3 weeks. The end is near for all of those things.
Whoa, don't say that. I have way too many F's for you to be saying.
Okay.
I got like a good 5.
You should probably do something about that.
I have 8 classes.
Anyway,
No, I did last year.
to start this, you need to know what your A, B, and C values are from your equation. It would be good if you knew this or remembered this, but you'll also be given it on the quiz and test, so if you don't know it or remember it off the top of your head, that's okay. I will say those of you moving on to algebra 2, you will need to know and remember this, so if you start to remember it now, it would help you. There's a song that goes along with it, I'm not going to sing it, but you could search that, and that would also help you remember it. So we're going to use this formula as a way to solve. So we've talked about solving using square roots. We're now going to talk about solving using the quadratic formula. Jada, have a seat. Have a seat. Have a seat. And you shouldn't have answered. Have a seat. We did not talk about solving by factoring, but that's something you'll do in Algebra 2. But this is like, if factoring doesn't work, then this is what you would do. So for this example, you need to list out what your A, B, and C values are. Do that for all of your problems, no matter what. What would your A value for this be?
X squared.
Number in front of x squared.
Six.
Number in front of x squared.
What's 1?
1. And then your B value,
6. Negative 6.
negative 6. And your C value,
4.
4. So then we would use these three values and put them into the formula. So we're first going to set it up exactly as is. So x equals negative b, our b value is negative 6. So I'm going to put that in parentheses. Plus or minus the square root of, anytime you do your b squared, put that in parentheses. Minus 4 times your a value of 1 times your c value, which is 4. All over 2 times your a value, which is 1. So it's a lot at first because you have to put a lot of stuff in, but once you get the hang of it, it's not so bad.
What's like the thing underlined with the plus?
This
Yeah.
is a plus and a minus together.
Oh.
Plus minus.
It's like when we're doing solving by square roots, that plus minus, same thing. Then, little by little, we're going to start to simplify this. So, negative and negative would become a positive. And then we're going to have the square root of negative 6 times negative 6, or negative 6 squared is 36. Leave this minus and multiply these three numbers together, the 4, the 1, and the 4. So 16.
Negative.
We're leaving the minus, but yes. And then all over 2. Then we can simplify some more. (36 minus 16 would give us 20.
Excuse me.
At this point, the way to keep simplifying this, you have to look at the number underneath the radical, or the square root. This is called your discriminant. In Algebra 2, you'll talk more about this and how that number helps you determine the number of solutions. We're not doing that here. The only thing we're doing with this and looking to see, is this a perfect square or not? Is 20 a perfect square? No. So if it's not a perfect square, we're not going to put that in our calculator and get a decimal. We're going to leave that as the square root of 20. And then we're going to separate this into two different answers. So we'll have 6 minus the square root of 20 all over 2. And we'll have 6 plus the square root of 20 over 2. There's nothing else we can really do to simplify this. I can't divide the 6 and the 2 unless I separate the fraction, which we're not doing.
Doesn't matter what we make. So would it matter if we did it like 6 plus?
The square root of 20 and then, no.
But it has to be 1 has to be negative, 1 has to be positive.
Right. And then your final answer is going to be your solution set of basically what you just wrote. So once you get to this part, if you know that you can't simplify this discriminant, then you could jump right to the solution set. Before we continue, what questions do we have on that? So really it's just you finding your A, B, and C value, putting it into the formula over and over and over again. Let's try number 1. What is your A value? 1. What is your B value? And your C value? So we would set it up just like we were before. X equals, it's a negative, and my B value is 10. Plus or minus the square root of B squared, even though it's positive, still use parentheses, minus 4 times your A value of 1 times your C value of negative 2. All over 2 times your A value, which is 1. Once you get the hang of this, if you want to start simplifying more at the same time, you could do that. What I mean by that is this.
That's 12 of. Okay.
Did you figure out the answer to your question?
No, yeah.
Okay. This can't be simplified anymore. We can simplify this to 2. But if we want to simplify this inside all at the same time, we could do that in our calculator. So I would put 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 2. All at the same time. That way I don't have to simplify this part and then this part and then simplify them together or combine them together. That way we automatically know what our discriminant number is, 108. So if you wanted to skip down to that step by using your calculator, you could do that. If you would rather still see out all of the pieces when you simplify, you could also do that. It's really your preference.
Wait, Mr.
How did I get the 108?
Yeah.
In the calculator form. I took what was inside
Oh, because it was negative 2. All right.
and just put that in all at the same time. What was your question?
They are actually the same thing.
So I took everything that was inside, the 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 2.
Like, cause like you know, like how you can't do that for all
all the time? Like, are you gonna be able to do that for every question?
For all of these questions, yes. You'll be able to do this for all of them. Now, don't do the square root of all of this, because you may or may not get a decimal. So leave the square root out and just put the numbers on the inside. If you put the square root, then yes, I would say you could not do that for all. Is 108 a perfect square?
No.
No. So that means 108 is going to stay the same. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to my solution set, which would be negative 10 minus the square root of 108 all over 2, and negative 10 plus the square root of 108 all over 3. We are going to get to some ones that we can take the square root of. I think this next one we're going to do is not that case, but that's okay. Do we have questions on this so far? Number 2 is a little different because it's not in the format that we already have. It's not equal to 0. We have to get it back in that format by taking this 4x and moving it over. We're going to subtract since this is positive. I'm not actually subtracting it to x squared or negative 11. I'm just moving it to the other side. And the only way to do that is to subtract. So I have x squared minus 4x minus 11 equals 0. Once I have that back again, then I can find my a, b, and c and continue from there.
So you put -4 all the way where right below the x.
So if I were putting it actually in order, so what I would actually be doing when I subtract over here is doing this. There's like an invisible 0x term over here, and I'm subtracting it to that term. But instead of writing that out to show that, I just subtracted it over there. That's why I said I'm not actually subtracting it over there. I'm just moving it. What is your A value? 1. What is your B value? -4. And your C value? -11. So now we can take those 4 numbers and put it in your formula. So x equals negative b. I put b. I meant 4. Plus or minus the square root of b squared -4 squared minus 4 times your a value, which is 1, times your c value, -11. All over 2 times your a value. When we start to simplify this, the negative and the other negative would become a positive. We could put this inside, all in the calculator at the same time. that have negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 11. And then I could figure out what that is. Is 60 a perfect square? No. So we're going to leave it as is. Our solution would be x equals 4 minus the square root of 60 and 4 plus the square root of 60.
Can I use the graph now? Wait, can I just...
Oh, I don't remember writing that. Go ahead. You could have written it earlier.
Oh, you didn't write it, you just passed it.
This next one we're going to simplify more because it's going to have an actual perfect square. Before we do anything, we need to make sure 20 is on the other side so that this equals 0. We're going to move it to the other side by subtracting. So x squared minus 8x minus 20 equals 0. Now that everything is on the same side, we can write our a, b, and c value.
So A is always in front of the X.
A is always in front of the x squared.
So if it's obviously it's just X then minus 8X. Just then would A be X?
There's always going to be an x squared. Okay, so for this, A is 1, B is negative 8, C is negative 20.
Wait, how is A 1?
Because you don't put the S.
Yeah, there's an invisible 1 in front of x
Yeah,
squared.
but like what was A supposed to be in front of it? So that would
It's always a 1.
In front of the x squared, not the x by itself. So the number in front of x squared, not this one. Okay, start putting this in your formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 20. All over 2 times 1. Simplify, this would be positive 8 plus or minus the square root of. You can put that on your calculator and figure out what that is. Is 144 a perfect square? Yes. So because 144 is a perfect square, now when we simplify this, we're going to end up with fractions or whole numbers or something like that. So the square root of 144 is what? 12. So now we're going to have 8 minus 12 all over 2 and 8 plus 12 all over 2. And we would need to simplify both of these fractions. So 8 minus 12 would give us negative 4. 8 plus 12 would give us 20. And then we can simplify again. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. 20 divided by 2 is 5. 10. I was thinking 4. So if you have a perfect square, you're going to simplify a lot more. If you don't, then you won't. Sometimes you'll get whole numbers, sometimes you'll get fractions or decimals. Leave it as a fraction, whatever it is. Before we do another, do we have any questions on this so far? We're going to do one more of these and then we'll stop for today. For number 4. What are your A, B, and C values? One for A, negative 5 for B,
Negative 26 for C.
and negative 36 for C. Then we can put those numbers into our formula and start. So x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. If this is not enough space, get extra paper on this, on the quiz, on the test, any of those. If it's not enough space, get more paper. Start to simplify. So x equals 5 plus or minus. When you put that into your calculator, what number do you get here? 169. Is that a perfect square? 13, yeah. There it is. So we're going to simplify it more. So we would have 5 plus or minus 13 over 2. So then our two fractions would be 5 minus 13 over 2 and 5 plus 13 over 2. Five minus 13 would give us what?
8. Okay, that way it's right.
Yeah, you do. And then 5 plus 13, 18. And then we just need to simplify our final answer. So negative 4, positive 8. I'm sorry, positive 9.
Been a long day.
Really? I'm going to stop there, but you are welcome to continue doing this. The only way you get better at this is to practice. We will be doing more of this next class as well, but I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to stop. I will say that you do have a Khan Academy on just quadratic formula due not this week, but next week, as well as a Delta Math on this due next week. But make sure that the things for this week are done. So your graphing stuff, your zeros or solution stuff, Khan Academy and Delta Math. You can be working on any of that stuff. Practice on this. Does math, Khan Academy. Make sure you're working on something.